rising to the surface. The underwater museum Sebastian had built was a marvel of engineering and artistry, constructed within a natural underwater cave system 30 feet below the Pacific's surface. Glass-walled chambers connected by pressurized tunnels housed dozens of masterpieces in climate-controlled environments, each piece accompanied by placards detailing their theft, forgery, and planned return to their rightful owners. Natalie descended in diving gear alongside FBI agents, her marine biology training making her the ideal guide through the underwater approach. Through the crystal-clear water, she could see Sebastian waiting in the main gallery chamber, his silhouette outlined against the soft lighting that illuminated priceless works of art. Visual confirmation on the target, Agent Rivera's voice, crackled through the underwater communication system. Dr. Chen, remember your mother's safety depends on this operation going smoothly. I understand, Natalie replied, though her heart hammered against her ribs. Dr. Patricia Chen was being held somewhere in the museum complex, and Dmitri had made it clear that any aggressive moves would result in her immediate execution. Sebastian turned as Natalie entered the main chamber through the airlock. Even through his diving mask, she could see the relief and fear warring in his green eyes. I'm sorry, he mouthed silently, knowing FBI agents were monitoring their conversation. Touching reunion, Dmitri Volkov's voice echoed through the chamber's speaker system. Though I must say, Ghost, your underwater gallery is quite impressive. A fitting monument to our partnership. Dmitri emerged from a side chamber, his pale blue eyes taking in every detail of Sebastian's creation. He'd aged during his imprisonment, his silver hair now completely white, but his predatory intelligence remained sharp as broken glass. Where is Dr. Chen? Sebastian demanded, his voice steady despite the wire concealed beneath his diving suit. Safe for now. Though I must admit, she's been quite vocal about her daughter's choice in men. Dmitri gestured toward the displayed artwork. Tell me, do you remember this Picasso sketch? The one we liberated from that private collector in Barcelona? I remember you killing the night watchman who surprised us, Sebastian replied coldly. I remember deciding that night that I wanted out. Sentiment makes men weak, Dmitri observed, moving closer to Natalie. Your marine biologist here, for instance. Does she know about the Van Gogh you forged for her mother's medical research funding? The one that funded Dr. Patricia Chen's breakthrough cancer treatments? Natalie's blood ran cold. What? Oh, yes, my dear. Your mother's facility didn't just receive anonymous donations. Sebastian specifically commissioned forgeries to be sold, with proceeds directed to cancer research. Quite personal, really. Sebastian's jaw tightened. Leave her out of this, Dmitri. Why cancer research, Ghost? Dmitri pressed, circling them like a shark. What made that cause so important to Sebastian Blackwood? My parents didn't die in a car accident, Sebastian said quietly, his eyes fixed on Natalie. My mother died of cancer when I was 25. My father started the forgery operation to pay for experimental treatments that insurance wouldn't cover. And when the treatments failed, Dmitri prompted, he couldn't stop. The debt, the connections, the network he'd built. It all became self-perpetuating. By the time he died, I'd inherited an empire I never wanted. Natalie felt her understanding of Sebastian shift like tectonic plates beneath the ocean floor. Every piece of the puzzle, the anonymous donations, his attempt to go legitimate, his desperate need to return stolen art, suddenly formed a coherent picture of a man trying to transform inherited guilt into something meaningful. How touching, Dmitri sneered. Unfortunately, your redemption arc ends here. I've planted enough explosives in this underwater tomb to turn it into a real grave. You have 5 minutes to wire transfer $50 million to my offshore accounts, or we all become permanent residents of the deep. The FBI is already surrounding the area, Sebastian warned. Let them come. They'll find nothing but debris and bodies. Dmitri pulled out a detonator. though I might be persuaded to spare the women if you agree to return to our partnership permanently. There's another option, Natalie said suddenly, her mind racing through calculations. The cave system this museum is built in connects to a series of thermal vents about 200 meters north. If we could trigger a controlled collapse in the right location— You want to flood the chamber? Sebastian realized. Not flood, redirect. The thermal vents create upward currents strong enough to carry us to the surface quickly, but only if we time it precisely. Natalie turned to Dmitri. You want to destroy everything? Fine. But you won't control how it happens. Dmitri's eyes narrowed. What are you proposing? A race to the surface. You, Sebastian, and me. First one up wins everything. Your freedom, my mother's life, the entire art collection. Lose, and the ocean decides your fate. Dr. Chen, Agent Rivera's voice crackled through the hidden communication system. What are you doing? Natalie ignored the warning, focusing on Dmitri's competitive nature. Unless you're afraid you can't outswim a marine biologist and a reformed art forger? Dmitri laughed, but his pale eyes showed interest. And if I win, you get Sebastian, the art, and a 30-minute head start before the FBI moves in. Natalie lied smoothly. Natalie, no, Sebastian warned, but she was already moving toward the chamber's emergency release. The thermal vents will create chaotic currents, she explained quickly. Stay close to me, and when I give the signal, swim directly upward as fast as you can. Dmitri activated his detonator, and the underwater museum began to collapse in a controlled sequence of explosions. Water rushed through the breached chambers as Natalie triggered the emergency systems that would redirect the flow toward the thermal vents. The three of them were swept into the powerful current as the cave system transformed into an underwater tornado. Dmitri, despite his age, was a strong swimmer, but he fought against the current instead of using it. Sebastian followed Natalie's lead, trusting her knowledge of underwater dynamics. As they spiraled upward through the thermal vent system, Natalie saw FBI divers waiting at strategic points. She'd been counting on their positioning, knowing that Agent Rivera would have backup plans within backup plans. Dmitri broke the surface first, gasping and disoriented by the chaotic ascent. FBI agents immediately surrounded him, but he still clutched a backup detonator. Dr. Patricia Chen, he snarled as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. You'll never find her body. We already have, Agent Rivera announced, surfacing nearby. She's safe aboard our rescue vessel, along with Marcus Reed and the rest of your organization. We've been tracking your communications for weeks. As Sebastian and Natalie floated together in the Pacific swells, watching Dmitri being taken into custody, the sun broke through the clouds above them. The underwater museum was gone, along with the art collection that had defined Sebastian's criminal past. But somehow the loss felt like liberation rather than destruction. Your mother's research will continue, Sebastian said quietly, treading water beside her. I've already transferred my legitimate assets to establish a permanent endowment. And you? Natalie asked, studying his face in the golden sunlight. Agent Rivera offered me a consulting position with the FBI's Art Crimes Unit. Apparently, reformed criminals make excellent advisors for catching current ones. Natalie smiled, reaching for his hand beneath the water. The ocean has a way of washing things clean. Is that your professional opinion, Dr. Chen? It's my personal experience, she replied, pulling him closer. Sometimes you have to dive deep to find what's worth surfacing for. As rescue boats approached, and their new life together began to take shape above the waves, Sebastian realized that some treasures were worth more than any masterpiece, and some secrets, once brought to light, became the foundation for something infinitely more valuable than the shadows they'd replaced. Dangerous revelations. The abandoned warehouse district smelled of rust and broken dreams. Valentina crouched behind a shipping container, rain streaming down her face as she watched Gabriel check his weapon with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done it countless times. They'd argued for 20 minutes about him coming with her, but he'd been immovable. "Your brother died because I wasn't there to help," he'd said simply. "I won't make that mistake twice." Now, staring at the warehouse where Marcus claimed her supposedly dead brother was being held, Valentina wondered if they were walking into an elaborate trap. 3 years of carefully constructed lies were unraveling, and she didn't know who to trust anymore. "Movement," Gabriel whispered into his earpiece, passing along intel to the backup team he'd assembled. 6 guards visible, probably more inside. Valentina's stomach churned. If Diego was really alive, if he'd been alive this whole time while she'd grieved him and blamed herself for missing his funeral. Then someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to convince her otherwise. The question was why. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Bring Gabriel Sterling. We have information about his brother's real killer." "It's a trap," Gabriel said when she showed him the message. "Of course it's a trap." Valentina checked. Her own weapon, the familiar weight of the Sig Sauer, comforting in her palm. "The question is whether we're the hunters or the prey." They approached the warehouse from separate angles, using the maze of containers and rusted machinery as cover. The rain had turned the ground to mud, muffling their footsteps, but making every surface treacherous. Valentina's heart hammered against her ribs as she recognized the tactical setup. Too many sight lines, too many ways for this to go wrong. Thiwa. Warehouse doors stood open, yellow light spilling out into the darkness. Inside, she could see a single figure tied to a chair in the center of the space. Even from this distance, even after 3 years, she recognized the familiar slouch of Diego's shoulders, her baby brother, alive. "Valentina!" Marcus Rivera emerged from the shadows, his hands raised but never quite empty. Her former partner looked older, harder, with new scars mapping his face. "I know this looks bad, but you need to trust me." "Trust you?" Valentina kept her weapon trained on him. "You faked my brother's death. You've been lying to me for 3 years. To protect you." Marcus's voice cracked with something that might have been genuine emotion. "After Budapest, after David Sterling and the others died, we knew there was a mole in the agency. Someone, high up, someone with access to everything." Gabriel stepped out of the shadows, his own weapon steady. "Keep talking." "Diego was the bait," Marcus continued. "We needed the mole to think Valentina was isolated, grief-stricken, easier to manipulate. So we faked his death and hid him in witness protection. Bullshit." Valentina's finger tightened on the trigger. If that were true, why reveal it now? Why here? That's when she heard the slow clap echoing from inside the warehouse. A figure emerged from the deeper shadows, tall, silver-haired, with the kind of confidence that came from holding all the cards. Jonathan Hayes, Deputy Director of Operations. Her former boss, the man who'd recruited her straight out of Yale, who'd been like a father to her for 8 years. "Because, my dear Valentina," Hayes said with avuncular warmth that made her skin crawl, "the game has changed. The mole isn't in the agency. The mole is the agency." Gabriel's weapon swung toward Hayes, but froze when more figures emerged from the warehouse. At least a dozen armed operatives, all with the same cold professionalism she recognized from her CIA days. "Jonathan!" Valentina's voice was steady despite the betrayal tearing through her chest. "You sold us out in Budapest." "I sold out a compromised operation to preserve a larger one." Hayes's tone was almost apologetic. 12 lives to save thousands. It was the right call." "David Sterling was 26 years old," Gabriel said, his voice deadly quiet. "He'd been on the job for 8 months. Collateral damage." Hayes shrugged. "As you'll both be, unfortunately. Though I want you to know, Valentina, that this gives me no pleasure. You are always my best operative." "Then why?" The word came out broken. "Why betray everything we worked for?" "Because the world is changing, and America needs to change with it." Hayes gestured to his men who began moving into position. "The Kozlov Syndicate isn't our enemy. They're our future partners in a new kind of warfare. Corporate espionage, cyber terrorism, financial manipulation. The old rules don't apply anymore. You're talking about treason, Gabriel said. I'm talking about survival. Hayes pulled out his phone, showing them a video feed. Diego was conscious now, a gun pressed to his temple by someone just out of frame. Here's how this works. You both put down your weapons and walk into that warehouse. You give me everything. You know about my operations, every piece of evidence you've gathered, and maybe, Diego lives. Valentina felt her world collapsing. Her brother, her mentor, her entire professional life, all built on lies and manipulation. And if we refuse? Then Diego dies right now, and you both follow shortly after. Hayes's smile was cold. Oh, and Valentina? That gallery of yours? The Monet you donated tonight? It's been wired with enough explosives to level the entire block. I'd hate for all those innocent art lovers to suffer for your stubbornness. Gabriel caught her eye, gave the slightest nod toward his watch. Whatever backup plan he had, they were running out of time to execute it. All right, Valentina said, slowly lowering her weapon. You win, Jonathan. But I want to see Diego first. I want to make sure he's alive. Of course. Hayes's smile widened. After all, family reunions are so touching, don't you think? As they walked toward the warehouse, Valentina realized that everything she'd believed about her life, her work, her purpose, had been carefully constructed lies. But the man walking beside her, the stranger who'd chosen to stand with her against impossible odds, that felt more real than anything she'd experienced in years. Whatever happened next, she wasn't facing it alone. Part 4. The Ultimate Betrayal. The private island compound rose from the Pacific like a fortress of glass and steel. Elena Blackwood stood on the helipad, her platinum hair whipping in the rotor wash as Gabriel and Valentina were escorted from the helicopter at gunpoint. Even after 12 hours of captivity, the woman who'd once been Gabriel's mentor and lover looked every inch the tech industry powerhouse who'd helped build his empire. Gabriel. Elena's voice carried genuine warmth that made Valentina's skin crawl. You look tired. I told Jonathan this could have been handled more elegantly. Elena. Gabriel's voice was flat, emotionless. I should have known you were behind this. Behind it? Darling, I created it. Elena gestured to the compound sprawling across the island. Laboratories, server farms, what looked like a private military training facility. Everything you've accomplished, every innovation that made Sterling Industries great, started here. With me. Valentina studied the woman who'd apparently orchestrated years of manipulation. Elena Blackwood was in her early 40s, beautiful in the calculated way of someone who'd weaponized every aspect of her appearance. But it was her eyes that set off every alarm bell in Valentina's head. Intelligent, ruthless, completely devoid of empathy. Where's my brother? Valentina demanded. Safe, for now. Elena turned toward the main building, expecting them to follow. Along with several other people whose continued existence depends on your cooperation. The compound's interior was a study in contradictions, cutting-edge technology housed in architecture that felt more like a luxury resort than a criminal stronghold. Elena led them through corridors lined with servers and research stations where teams of technicians worked on projects Valentina couldn't begin to identify. Impressive, isn't it? Elena paused before a wall of monitors displaying what looked like financial data from major corporations around the world. 5 years of work, building a network that can topple governments or crash markets with a few keystrokes. Gabriel's security protocols were the final piece I needed. My protocols aren't for sale, Gabriel said coldly. They aren't for sale because they're already mine. Elena's smile was triumphant. Every system you've designed, every algorithm, you've perfected. I've had access to all of it through your dear mother's financial arrangements with the Kozlovs. The betrayal hit Gabriel like a physical blow. You've been stealing my work for years. Borrowing, Elena corrected. After all, I taught you everything you know about cybersecurity. Consider it payment on an old debt. They entered a control room overlooking what appeared to be a private dock where several high-end yachts bobbed in the evening light. But Valentina's attention was fixed on the monitors showing live feeds from multiple locations. Sterling Industries headquarters, her art gallery, what looked like a government building in Washington. The beauty of modern warfare, Elena continued conversationally, is that battles are won in boardrooms and server farms, not on traditional battlefields. Why destroy a country when you can simply buy it? Is that what this is about? Valentina asked. Money? Power, control, the ability to shape the world according to my vision rather than leaving it to the incompetents currently in charge. Elena's eyes gleamed with fanatic fervor. The Kozlov Syndicate, Hayes's network within the CIA, my corporate connections, they're all just tools to achieve something larger. Love worth fighting for one. Year later, Commissioner Rosa Martinez stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of Sterling Industries' newly rebuilt headquarters, watching the Chicago skyline glitter in the afternoon sun. The scars from Elena Blackwood's final gambit had mostly healed, the company was stronger, the city safer, and the international conspiracy that had claimed so many lives was finally dismantled. The grand jury returned indictments on all the remaining network members. She reported to Gabriel, who was reviewing security protocols at his desk. Elena's island compound yielded enough evidence to prosecute cases in 14 countries. Gabriel nodded without looking up from his work. The past year had changed him. There were new lines around his gray eyes, a gravity that hadn't been there before. Saving the world came with a price, even when you won. And the others? He asked. Jonathan Hayes died in federal custody before he could testify. Heart attack, though given what we know about Elena's resources, that's questionable. Rosa's expression was grim. Dmitry Volkov is in a maximum security facility in Russia. His government was happy to trade him for some of the intelligence we recovered. Gabriel finally looked up. What about Diego? Clean bill of health. The bone marrow transplant was successful. Rosa smiled for the first time. Timothy's in remission, too. Kids are resilient. Before Gabriel could respond, the office doors opened and Valentina walked in, carrying a toddler with dark curls and her own expressive brown eyes. Timothy Cross had grown in the year since the island, no longer the sick child they'd seen on Elena's monitors, but a healthy, energetic 3-year-old who'd wrapped himself around his aunt's heart. Uncle Gabe! Timothy squirmed out of Valentina's arms and launched himself at Gabriel, who caught him with practiced ease. Hey, buddy, how was your day with Aunt Val? We went to the zoo and saw lions and tigers and... Timothy's explanation dissolved into excited gibberish that only he understood. Valentina caught Gabriel's eye over the boy's head, and the look that passed between them was warm with shared affection and something deeper. The past year had tested them in ways that battlefield romances couldn't prepare for: grief counseling, family therapy, learning to trust again after a lifetime of deception. Diego's picking him up at 5, Valentina said, settling into the chair across from Gabriel's desk. He got the job at Northwestern, assistant professor of psychology, specializing in trauma recovery. Appropriate career change for someone who survived what he did, Rosa observed. Diego Cross had spent 3 years in Elena's custody, believing his sister was dead, used as leverage to ensure his cooperation in various intelligence operations. The reunion between the siblings had been difficult. Too much pain, too many lies to work through quickly. But they were healing, building a relationship based on truth instead of the fiction they'd grown up believing. Speaking of career changes, Gabriel said, raising an eyebrow at Valentina, how's the new venture coming? Valentina's art gallery had been destroyed in Elena's final assault on Chicago, but from its ashes had risen something better, a foundation providing support and resources for former intelligence operatives struggling to adapt to civilian life. It kept her connected to her past while building something positive for the future. "We're opening the Chicago branch next month," she said with quiet pride. 12 cities now, with more planned. Turns out there are a lot of people who need help, learning how to live normal lives. "Normal being relative," Gabriel said dryly. Rosa cleared her throat. "I should let you two get back to your evening. Timothy, are you being good for your aunt?" "Always," Timothy said solemnly, which made all the adults laugh. After Rosa left, Gabriel's office fell into comfortable quiet. Timothy played with the collection of action figures Gabriel kept in a desk drawer specifically for his visits, while the adults watched the sun set over the city they'd fought to protect. "Father Thomas called today," Valentina said eventually. "Or should I say Colonel Santos? I still haven't gotten used to that." Gabriel reached for her hand. "How's he adjusting to retirement?" "Better than expected. The Jesuits were remarkably understanding about the whole fake priest situation. Apparently, he'd been feeding intelligence to them about human trafficking operations for years. They're letting him stay at the monastery while he transitions back to civilian life. The discovery that her father, the man she'd called Father Thomas her entire life, was actually a deep cover operative who'd spent decades posing as a priest while running Black Ops missions, had shattered everything Valentina thought she knew about her childhood. But slowly, carefully, they were building a new relationship based on honesty. "And you?" Gabriel asked gently. "How are you adjusting?" Valentina considered the question. A year ago, she'd been running from shadows, living a carefully constructed lie, convinced that love was a luxury she couldn't afford. Now she was planning a future with a man who'd seen her at her worst and chosen to stay, raising her nephew, rebuilding her relationship with her father and brother. "Better than I expected," she admitted. "Some days I still wake up expecting it all to be another cover identity. But then I see you. Or Timothy laughs at something ridiculous. Or Diego calls just to check in and it feels real." Gabriel brought her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "It is real." "We're real." Timothy looked up from his toys, apparently bored with the adult conversation. "Aunt Val, are you and Uncle Gabe gonna get married?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Valentina felt her cheeks burn, but Gabriel just smiled. "That depends," he said seriously to Timothy, "on whether your aunt says yes." Gabriel stood and moved to his desk safe, retrieving a small velvet box that made Valentina's heart stop. "I know we've talked about taking things slow, about building something solid before making it official, but watching you with Timothy, seeing you rebuild your life from the ground up, Valentina, you're the strongest person I've ever met, and I want to spend the rest of my life being worthy of that strength." He dropped to one knee beside her chair, opening the box to reveal a simple solitaire diamond that caught the light like a promise. "Valentina Maria Santos, formerly Cross, will you marry me?" Timothy clapped his hands with delight, apparently understanding that this was an important moment, even if he didn't fully grasp why. Valentina looked at the ring, at Gabriel's hopeful face, at Timothy's excited grin. A year ago, she'd been convinced that people like her didn't get happy endings. But maybe, after all the lies and betrayals and carefully constructed facades, the most radical thing she could do was choose love. "Yes," she said, her voice steady and sure. "Yes, I'll marry you." Gabriel slipped the ring onto her finger with hands that trembled slightly, and when he kissed her, Timothy cheered. Through the windows, Chicago sparkled in the gathering dusk, a city they'd protected together and would continue to guard as they built their future. Some love stories began with chance meetings and stolen glances. Theirs had started with gunfire and betrayal, with secrets and lies and the kind of danger that should have torn them apart. But they'd chosen each other anyway, again and again, through every revelation and every trial. It was, Valentina thought as Gabriel's arms closed around. Her and Timothy demanded to see the pretty ring, exactly the kind of love worth fighting for.